talk about habits? Why am I going to focus on habits in this part of the class? Well, it's simple. Habits are bite-sized things that you can adopt that are going to allow you to build a better productivity framework and a better lifestyle in general over time. So some of the best habits that I recommend that you start with include the idea of time theming, which is what we're going to be doing with this project. So the idea of giving yourself an overarching focus for every single day. I'm not a big believer in the scheduling every moment of the day component that a lot of productivity tacticians kind of, promote. And the reason is because I call it the About a Boy syndrome. So basically the movie About a Boy is got this Hugh Grant character who lived by routine. Everything was done in 15-minute increments. He had this thing locked down. And then what happened one day is this boy showed up and threw everything out of whack. And that's what happens when you schedule your day, or hyper schedule your day as I call it, is that you leave no room for the boy to show up, good or bad, great opportunities or bad opportunities or emergencies that show up. You run into this issue where if you hyper schedule your day, it ends up that you have to slide things to the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and all of a sudden the things that are getting slid are those important things that you know are going to make a huge impact. So time theming, what that allows you to do is give yourself an overarching focus for the day. So what happens there is you end up saying, instead of what do I do next, if you get pulled away into a meeting or by some phone call or a random email, you say, what day is it? And then if it's that day of the week, you look at the day and you say what theme that day has, and then you know what course of action you should be taking, what your overarching focus should be. So that's a big one. Another one that I'm big on is scheduling in time chunks, and that's another type of time theming, but it's done horizontally. So this is probably closer to the schedule every moment of your day aspect. But what it is, instead of saying I'm going to check email from 1 to 2 p.m. or I'm going to answer this from 3 to 4, is you give yourself a broader focus. So maybe from 9 a.m. to noon, you're going to focus on administrative work, maybe based on your body clock, on your energy. Maybe that's when you want to do that stuff. And maybe from 7 to 9 p.m. is going to be family time because your children are up at that time and you want to make sure you give them your attention. So it's broader strokes of theming, and I call this horizontal theming or time chunking. And I think that that's another habit that you can adopt. Another one is stacking your habits. So starting off with things like flossing your teeth. Flossing your teeth is a habit that a lot of people kind of adopt and then they throw it away, and they're told every single time that they should do it. And I used to struggle with this a lot. Now what's happened to me is when I go to bed and I don't floss before I go to bed, it feels weird. I know I've missed something. So having that habit in place allows me to know that there's something that I must do. It becomes ingrained. And then you stack another habit on top of that, maybe moisturizing if that's something you want to do. And I'm using simple life stuff here, but you can apply this to work stuff as well. And then once you stack habit upon habit, then you can start to put these into routines. Now you've probably heard of the morning routine. I'm sure some of you have that. But how many of you have an evening routine? Like, do you have an evening routine? I believe the evening routine is more critical than the morning routine, whether you're a night owl or an early riser. And let me explain why. Well, you want to start off the day in the best possible way. Remember in the last part where I talked about the guy who was checking email first thing in the morning? Well, that was because he didn't have a plan in place to do anything else other than that. So by mapping out his day the night before, picking what I call his 3 absolutes, he was able to pick one of those and then do that before he moved into the other areas of his work, whether it's emails, phone calls, meetings, whatever. He took care of that thing first. But he mapped it out the night before. He didn't have to think in the morning about what to do. It was already decided for him. That's what routines do for you, especially morning and evening routines. They give you a framework, go figure, to work off of, and then you can fill in the rest of the day with all the dynamic stuff that happens. Now, having the right framework in place to build habits that will stick is key. And I touched on the idea of not scheduling everything in your calendar a little bit earlier. And there's a reason behind that, other than the fact that when you get distracted or disrupted and ultimately diverted, that you can go off course. The other thing is that the things that really matter that you want to put on your calendar don't stand out. It's part of the overwhelming component of your day. I mean, imagine looking at your calendar, and maybe you do this already, where you see just appointment after appointment after appointment after appointment. That's really what you're doing when you use your calendar as a to-do list. You're basically making these constant agreements with yourself. And some of those you're gonna have to break, whether you want to or not, because we don't always have 100% control over our day. But if you want to use the calendar as a framework to support better habits, what you can do is put the right habits in your calendar. Now I've got a great example for you: exercise. I suck at the exercise habit. Now I've tried several ways to keep the exercise habit going. First off, I put it in my to-do list application. So I've actually had it in Todoist, which is the application I use, and it was something that was in there consistently. But because there are so many other things in my Todoist, it was kind of getting skipped over. It was that repeating task that I kind of just said, oh, well, I'll do it whenever. And it kept getting missed. So then what I did was I just said, okay, I want to exercise 5 days a week. So I just put it as an all-day activity on my calendar with the idea that, you know what, I will do it at some point. But guess what never happened? Exercise. So what I did was I actually put it in my calendar at a specific, consistent time every single day. By putting exercise at a consistent time for the days I wanted to exercise, I put myself in a position to be successful with keeping the habit and making it stick. You can do the same thing with meditation, yoga, maybe time you want to spend with your kids, but there's other agreements that you're going to have in there as well with others that you make: doctor's appointments, dentist's appointments, lawyer's appointments, meetings you have at the office. Those things belong in your calendar, but you don't want to overwhelm yourself in your calendar, because there's nothing worse than looking at your calendar and seeing a full day and knowing already that you're going to run into issues with getting all the things you need and want to get done during that day. So the thing is, if you have the right tool and the right way to pay attention to these intentions, which are keeping these habits, you can really move things forward. So if you're struggling with trying to figure out where you should put these habits, sure, you can write them down on paper. You could do that letter to yourself like I do, but maybe you want to use your task management tool like Todoist to put these consistent habits in there. Maybe you create a project that's called Habits, or a label that says Habits, and that's the one you monitor. But by putting it in there consistently, and it's a tool that you trust and you're going to consistently look at, the chances of those habits sticking and getting stronger improves day by day.